James parked his car in the lot and headed for the elevator. Suddenly, a noise caught his attention from behind. Turning, he noticed it emanating from his vehicle. Upon closer inspection, it appeared as though someone was seated inside. Over the recent days, James had been experiencing a series of ongoing incidents. Despite his efforts to distract himself, they only seemed to escalate in frequency. Fully aware of the situation, James silently boarded the elevator and headed straight to his apartment, ensuring to lock the door securely behind him. Having grappled with phone issues for several days, he finally decided to purchase a new one today. To his surprise, inside the phone case, he discovered a scratch card. Upon scratching it, he unveiled a car as the prize. Such incredible luck seemed almost unbelievable. Without delay, he powered on his new phone and dialed his friend David, eager to share the news. David, sharing in his joy, exclaimed, "Dude, looks like you're on fire now." James mentioned that in roughly an hour, he, along with his friends David and Mark, would convene. Planning to take a shower, James gathered his clothes and placed them in the washing machine, intending to launder them in the morning. As James showered, a noise caught his attention. He promptly turned off the water and exited the shower to investigate, finding the washing machine in operation. Perplexed, he recalled only loading clothes into the machine, not initiating the cycle. He promptly switched off the washing machine. As James removed the clothes from the machine, his eyes widened in shock. Bloodstains marred the once white fabric. Without hesitation, he swiftly changed into fresh clothes and made his way to David's house. Along the journey, he placed a call to David recounting all the unsettling events that had transpired. It's often warned not to cross the road while talking on the phone, and unfortunately, that's precisely what James was doing. Oblivious to the blaring horn, he failed to notice the dangerously approaching car, resulting in a collision that sent him sprawling. The phone lay abandoned on the pavement, and the only echoing sound in the silent street was the repetitive call of James's name. James. James had been experiencing a series of peculiar and out-of-the-ordinary occurrences in recent days. From winning a car in a scratch card upon purchasing a new phone to plans for a celebratory party among friends, the events had taken an unexpected turn. While engaged in a conversation with David over the phone, James found himself crossing the road, only to be abruptly struck by a dangerously approaching car. Simultaneously, David heard James's scream through the phone, prompting him to swiftly exit his house to aid his friend. However, as fate would have it, just as the elevator was descending towards the ground floor, it abruptly halted, presumably between the third and second floors, leaving David trapped inside. Fueled by urgency, David began shouting and repeatedly pressed the emergency button, desperately calling out, "Hey, anyone there? Elevator operator?" Sometime later, a noise echoed from above the elevator, catching David's attention. He glanced upwards and called out, "Hey, is someone up there? Get me out of here, man." David shouted once more. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps approached the elevator from outside, followed by the distinct sound of the door being unlocked. A hand extended inside, pulling David to safety. As he emerged, David expressed gratitude to the man while straightening his clothes. In response, the man simply replied, "You're welcome." Immediately after the man uttered welcome, the lights flickered on. David glanced around but found no one nearby. His primary concern remained James, so without hesitation, he made his way to the emergency exit stairs and hurried towards the parking lot. Upon arrival, he discovered his car with a flat tire, adding to his growing apprehension. David emerged onto the street and stood, patiently awaiting a taxi. As he rounded the corner towards James' residence, the distant hum of an approaching taxi and the brisk wind against his face only served to heighten David's anxiety. Despite his persistent attempts to reach James by phone, each call went unanswered, further fueling his unease. As the taxi began to pull away, a noise reminiscent of the one heard in the elevator echoed through the surroundings. Instantly, David motioned for the taxi to halt. Upon exiting the taxi, he scanned the area above, finding nothing. Seated once more, David tapped gently on the taxi's hood and called out, "Hey buddy, can you pick up the pace a bit?" David urged the taxi driver. In response, the driver swiveled in his seat and solemnly remarked, "Speed won't change a thing. James is already gone, no matter how fast we drive." Terrified not only by the chilling statement, but also by the ominous grin on the man's face, David acted impulsively. Without hesitation, he leaped out of the moving taxi, driven by the instinct to save himself. In his leap, he failed to notice the truck approaching from behind. Tragically, as soon as he landed, it collided with him, resulting in a fatal impact. James had been encountering a series of inexplicable events lately. Upon discovering his washing machine had started autonomously and spotting bloodstains on his garments, he headed towards David's residence. However, en route, he was struck by a car. Simultaneously, David was on the phone line. As David rushed from his house to aid James, tragedy struck, resulting in a fatal accident on the road, claiming David's life. Both friends' funeral services were held together on the same day. Mark's demeanor seemed troubled as he and his friend, Bob, made their way home. "Bob, I'm feeling really off. Could you take the wheel? And if it's not too much trouble, can you stay over at my place tonight?" Mark's isolation was evident to Bob as well. He added, "It's hard to believe how much we've drifted apart, buddy." Despite his longing to express himself, Mark found it difficult. Memories of old times spent with friends, the ups and downs, the laughter, all flooded his mind. Tearfully, Mark confided in Bob, who reassured him, "No, buddy, it's not what you think. Don't worry, it's just a coincidence, nothing more." They continued the journey in silence. Upon arriving home, they each took a shower before retiring to bed. Bob soon began to feel drowsy. After closing his eyes and drifting off to sleep, Bob was jolted awake by unfamiliar sounds and an odd smell. Quickly, he got out of bed and hurried to the kitchen. To his shock, he found Mark holding a lighter, poised to ignite the gas. With a gasp, Bob intervened, snatching the lighter from Mark's hand just in time. "The entire house is filled with gas, and you are about to ignite it. Are you out of your mind?" Bob yelled in alarm. Mark snapped awake from his slumber, disoriented and unaware of his actions. Bob guided him back to bed, remaining vigilant for some time thereafter. After ensuring the house was ventilated, Bob returned to bed and settled in. As he lay there for a while, Bob was roused from a drowsy state by the sound of a disturbance. Opening his eyes, he noticed Mark was nowhere to be seen. Bob called out for Mark, but received no reply. Bob rose from his bed and made his way to the living room. What he witnessed there caused his voice to catch in his throat, stunned by the sight before him. Mark's apartment occupied the 9th floor of the building. There, he stood by an open window, peering downwards as if contemplating a leap. Bob's voice boomed with urgency as he shouted, "Mark! What on earth are you doing? Are you out of your mind?" On the very same day, within a few hours of each other, James and David tragically met their fates in separate road accidents. Following the funerals of their friends, Mark did not return home alone. He was joined by his friend Bob. In the late hours of the night, Bob awoke to find Mark absent from his bed. Concerned, he searched the apartment and discovered Mark seated by the window, appearing poised to jump. Acting swiftly, Bob intervened just in time to prevent a tragedy. Tears streaming down his face, Mark turned to Bob and began to speak, his voice trembling with fear. "He's behind all of this, targeting me relentlessly. First, James and David, and now it's my turn. He won't stop until he gets me." Bob attempted to reassure him, urging Mark to calm down and assuring him that his fears were unfounded. After soothing Mark and settling him to sleep, Bob also retired to bed. However, not long after, as Bob heard a noise, the tranquility of the night was shattered by a loud splash. Bob sprang from his bed and hurried to the bathroom. Peering inside, he witnessed a horrifying scene. Mark submerged in the bathtub, struggling to stay afloat, his efforts to raise his head above the water proving futile. Bob exerted all his strength to extract Mark from the water, grasping for his wrist to hoist him onto the edge of the bathtub. However, an inexplicable heaviness burdened Bob, impeding his efforts. It felt as if an unseen force held him back, as though someone else's grip restrained him, causing Bob to unwittingly contribute to Mark's descent into the water. Bob, unable to discern the source of his restraint, resorted to desperate measures. Despite his reluctance, he seized a nearby hairdryer. With trembling hands, he aimed the appliance towards the bathtub and swung it with force. The dryer shattered upon contact, yet it succeeded in disrupting the surface tension of the water. Upon activating the electricity, Bob hurried to rescue Mark. Sadly, upon reaching him, Bob found that Mark had already perished. Currently, Bob is in police custody. According to his account, before his demise, Mark had mentioned his friend Liam. James, David, Mark, and Liam shared a tight-knit bond as close friends. Despite Liam's fear of water, his friends insisted on taking him on a boat ride. The peculiar aspect of this ride was the necessity to release the boat if it flipped in the sea, allowing the life jacket to surface. However, when the boat capsized, Liam's terror paralyzed him, preventing him from letting go. In mere moments, he met his demise. James later reported seeing Liam's apparition in various locations. Tragically, the same fate befell David and Mark. While Bob claimed it was his soul, the law demanded tangible evidence.